since its launch in 2020, and why this might be.
Pleasure to follow the, I think I would describe it as brave and challenging speech of the Noble Lord, Lord Mawson. And the Noble Lord did lead me to reflect on the impact of the first-past-the-post electoral system in creating one-party states in local government, with some of the outcomes that the Noble Lord outlined. Now, the Noble Lord also inspired me with his wanders through the tastes of Yorkshire, that I also have to mention the wonderful Rosanne Al-Sous, a Syrian refugee who came to Yorkshire in 2012 and missed what she describes as her squeaky cheese, traditional Hallam cheese that she ate in Damascus, and now has a award-winning company making that cheese in Yorkshire. I want to thank the Noble Lady Baroness Armstrong of Hilltop for securing this debate, and particularly the way in which the Noble Lady worded the topic. The word local in local regeneration of former industrial areas is so important here. I thank the Noble Lady also for highlighting the challenges constraining particularly local government. And a third thanks for the Noble Lady's timing, since last weekend my visit to Newcastle and North Tyneside means that I will have the same regional focus as the Noble Lady brought to this debate. However, my visit was somewhat differently directed towards the Biker estate, a 1970s-built social housing project with Grade 2 listed status, which has tried to maintain its existing community from the pre-development streets, but had many issues then and since in making this work. And what I saw for myself in my visit to Biker is a real struggle to deal with the problem of litter, with isolation and loneliness. But it's also notable that there are community groups such as Biker Mutual Aid, Biker Tenants and Residents Association, and the St Peters Basin Neighbourhood Association that have sprung up to try and fill in the gaps that have been left by more than a decade of austerity in terms of public services. Now, of course, Biker was the site of the incinerator and the ash scandal in the 1990s. Finally, the incinerator was closed due to the action of campaigners at the turn of the century. And picking up points that the Noble Lady made, we need to think about the clean-up of industrial and post-industrial areas. We really need to focus on public health. Clean air, clean water and soil are the crucial foundations for a healthy community. We know that across the UK we have a major problem with disability and chronic illnesses. Of course, individuals need support with that, but what we really need to do is build healthier communities so that people don't get ill in the first place. Now, I note that figures from the Office for Health Development, for Health Improvement and Disparities, the most deprived neighbourhoods in England, which are many of the areas we're talking about, people develop multiple long-term health conditions 10 to 15 years earlier than in the least deprived communities. They spend many more years in ill health and they die sooner. Now, one other thing that we need to focus on in many of these areas is, in terms of health, is warm, comfortable, affordable to heat homes. And that's a particular issue too in Biker, where the cost of the heating with a district heating system is considerably higher than in other areas. In so many of these post-industrial areas, the housing stock is poor, yet that also, of course, is a potential opportunity. The insulation of homes can create the field for many small independent businesses, provided they have the certainty of long-term government investment, not the boom and bust that's been induced by seesawing government policies. And I'm afraid in the case of the largest current opposition party, seesaws in their home energy efficiency policies even before they've got into government. Now, last month, the New Economics Foundation looked at the data on the government's home energy efficiency schemes and showed that in a single year, rollout has fallen by 40%. The total number of households upgraded by the Home Upgrade Grant, known as HUG, and the local authority delivery schemes had fallen by 40% in the last year. Similarly, the number of households upgraded under ECHO, the largest and longest running scheme, has fallen by 55% in the past year. The Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund has existed for less than 2 years, but if you look at the figures quarter on quarter, that's down 41% also. Now, of course, this is a key to Britain reaching its net zero targets, but it's also crucial to cutting the £2 billion costs for the NHS that come from the poor quality of our housing stock. And of course, money that has to be spent on heating cannot be spent with local businesses and suppliers. It goes off into big multinational pockets. Had the government brought in community energy schemes, as your Lordship's House tried to push very hard through the energy bill, the money could be returning into communities. Now, the importance of local activity, local energy, local decision-making. I really want to focus on some good news stories. And so one of the places I want to highlight is the Valley Project in Homewood. Again, I'm returning to Bradford. There was a project there, an adventure playground project. Money was parachuted in from London. The whole plan was parachuted in, some big high-tech equipment was installed, and it lasted a couple of years and fell apart. Then a couple of local people, ironically enough made unemployed by austerity, started small, working with the community, and it's now a wonderfully lively, successful project using mostly recycled and donated materials that the children work with themselves to design their own spaces. So a little advert for them. If anyone knows a localish source, they're currently looking for some large wooden cable rails for the children to use in their secret garden for tables and chairs. That gives you a sense of the kind of project that's working to really lift up that community. Now, I've not yet focused on industrial policy, as I'm sure many noble lords to follow in this debate may well. If we return to Byker, the area has a proud history of glassworks and community artists, a tradition that continues with the Mushroom Works, Test House 5 and Lime Street. Now, the estate was built with hobby rooms, spaces for people to do activities. The one that I visited used to house a dark room for the development of photography skills, but they're often not widely used today. What we need to do is see the resources there to be put in to work with local people to develop such facilities for modern-day uses. The key has to be to build on what is already there in communities, to focus on the skills, knowledge and the capacities of the local communities, rather than in bringing in highly paid outside consultants and grand plans drawn up by them. And here I want to draw a real contrast. The noble lady, Baroness Armstrong, caused me to cross out a significant part of my speech that covered over some of the Tees Works area. But I want to look at the alternative, perhaps the 180 degrees opposed model, the Preston model of public sector working, community wealth building, focused on the procurement policies of the local authority and other anchor institutions such as the university and housing providers, to support local businesses, develop new enterprise, encourage better working conditions such as the real living wage, and increase the socially productive use of wealth and assets, such as local government pension funds. So the focus is on genuine prosperity and creation of wealth in the community, rather than some often all too artificial bottom line. And I go back to a figure that I've cited in your Lordship's House before. 10% of the entire land area of Britain has been sold out of public ownership in the past 4 decades. 10% of the entire country. And that was 50% of what used to be public land holdings. What we need to see is a building up, a restoration of public assets, not further privatisation and loss to the public. And if you take, for example, in Preston, cooperatives, you've got the Brookfield Retrofit Cooperative, led by a community organisation, and a housing cooperative for the traveller community, run by the traveller community. What's not, as the noble lady Baroness Armstrong set out so clearly, the way forward is free ports. This is a model that encourages corruption, tax evasion and criminal activity. They suck businesses and jobs out of other areas. Indeed, the evidence around the world is that it's mostly a model built on relocation of existing businesses, not generating anything new. Now, I conclude by going to the words of Ruth Hannon, the former director of the People's Powerhouse in Preston, who told an event last year that the need for local government is to be as flexible as possible so it can improve people's lives. What Ms Hannon said was, most of the time we have to fit into the system rather than the system adapting to us. My Lords, I would suggest that that's a lesson for Westminster also. Westminster needs to get out of the road. Westminster needs to stop providing directions, stop being a backseat driver to ensure that local communities have the power and resources they need to make decisions for their own future, not with a direction from very often far, far, far away Westminster.